Hey everybody, welcome another edition of the Knowles 24/7 X's and Knowles position preview series. I am back, and it feels like it's been a long time since the three of us have gotten to record, and I've missed you both dearly. I'm here with Kevin. I'm here with Coach AB. I am Trey Rowland, and you can see Adam's got a great poker face on, but inside he's just a boiling bubble of excitement because we're talking about the offensive line. Look at that wry smile.
Fresh off of Craigslist.
Yeah, Adam had just found out somebody insulted him on a message board and he can't stop thinking about it. So, guys, don't do it again because you won't get to him. While Adam steams a little bit, Kevin, how are you doing? Are you ready to talk FSU's offensive line?
I think I could be as excited as a person could possibly be to talk about an offensive line, and I still wouldn't be as excited as that guy.
He is Adam. How are you feeling? Don't shrug us. We know you too well, man. How excited are you to talk about this unit? How excited actually are you about this unit?
I'm good. This is the position that worries me the most, but it always does because this is the most important position on the field. These five guys that make up this front offensive line unit. Kev would have you believe the quarterback is the most important. As I jumped on here tonight and he had us throw the dang ball hat, I made him take it off because that's not going to work here tonight.
Well, just because his hair looks so good. Absolutely. Yeah.
But these are the most important five people on the field, and this is where the games are won. This is where the bread gets butter for your football team. This is what makes an offensive go. All those cliches. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about them, but I'm cautiously optimistic about what this group's going to be, and we've talked about it a lot as the offseason's kind of waned on here, and as we've gotten into practices, and Kev's been out there and he's seen some stuff, and we're going to do our best to preview without giving away any state secrets because we know everybody will get mad at us. But yeah, I'm ready to talk about them. I think there's a lot of things to be excited about with this group.
Is your apprehension mostly, is it about depth? Is it about talent? Or is it kind of just Florida State has had like the worst offensive line in the country for like a very long time, and I have to see it to believe it?
I think it's about the ceiling of the group.
Okay.
I think the floor of the group's really good. Is the ceiling high enough for them to go win football games the way they haven't been able to? That NC State game last year is an example where a good offensive line or a really good offensive line just goes and takes that game over. And they weren't able to do that against a three-man front. We've seen them at times. They weren't great against LSU last year. They got beat up by Clemson, even though they were able to run for a bunch of yards, and everybody would tell you that they turned a big corner. There were a lot of negatives from that game offensive line-wise. I mean, you look at Rob Scott getting blown up and JT holding on the ball a little too long, which really kind of flipped that game on its head last year. So I think it's the ceiling that worries me, but I do believe the floor is a really good place right now.
And that's a good, because they did bring in a lot of talent via the transfer portal. We'll talk about those guys individually. I will say the Wake game too. That was one too, where it's just like you got just obliterated on the edges with a lot of the people that you brought in this year. Obviously, you're trying to bolster that unit. Before we start to get into the film, Kev, what do you think? And we're going to watch some of the film from the LSU game of last year to give you guys, some of the things that we saw from the returning guys. Then Kev's also got some individual film from Casey Roddick, the Colorado transfer, the interior transfer, and then Jeremiah Byers, the kid from UTEP, who we don't know where he's going to play. He's got capability of playing at pretty much any position on the line except for center. Kev, what do you how would you describe the level of play last year? Was FSU's offensive line in 2022 good, average, bad? Like, it's tough because a lot of the deficiencies that they did have, they were a productive unit. But with Jordan Travis as your quarterback, he can mask a lot of stuff. With your trained eye, how good was the offensive line actually last year?
Yeah, I think even a trained eye can be fooled by this offensive line's performance last year. I think that people like Alex Atkins, and I think that kind of flavors how they're going to interpret the offensive line. I think the offense was very productive. And I don't think, like, on the ground and through the air, I don't think they gave up too many sacks. But then you also have to consider that, Jordan Travis was probably one of the more was a top 10 quarterback in terms of how elusive he was in the pocket. And then, Trey Benson literally broke a PFF all-time record of tackles broken per carry. So you have to think, if you look at the stats by themselves, the raw stats really paint this offensive line as being about average last year, in terms of, how often were they giving up pressures? How many line yards do they get before contact for the running backs? I think average is unfair because I think they went up against some really good defensive lines.
Sure.
I mean,
Absolutely.
LSU, Oklahoma, Florida, Clemson, these were really good. I mean, even NC State and Louisville had really good defensive lines. Wake Forest had a guy that was drafted. So I think that they might have had average stats, but they were still probably a top 30, top 40-ish unit, in my opinion. And I think you need them to kind of be a little bit higher, because we're looking for this offense to be a top 3, top 5 unit in the country. That means that your offensive line needs to kind of have the floor and the ceiling, and that ceiling is really what's going to be the difference makers when you're playing these Clemsons and LSUs early in the season.
I'm with you, Kevin. The offense was very productive, so trying to get it to the next level, it's all about improving at the margins. And one thing you could say about this offensive line is that in obvious running situations, like Florida State's 4th down conversion rate was absolutely abysmal last year. They had some issues on the goal line, had to get a little bit more creative than a lot of people would have liked. And I'm sure some examples are sticking out in your head. I'm not going to go over them for the 9 millionth time. But when it's time to nut up or shut up, we just needed some more beef, some more physicality, some better talent. And I believe that we've added that. Now, how much of a difference does that make? And how much of a difference does that make against the LSUs and the Clemsons? I think the film's going to help us find that out. So we'll talk about that and what we think the ultimate potential of that unit is while we watch the film. But Kev, go ahead, bring on that LSU game, and we can talk about a lot of the guys that are returning this year. Guys like Robert Scott, Darius Washington, Maurice Smith, Big Meech, things of that nature.
So we're going to get both the kind of all 22 view, and then we'll get the end zone view here in a second. So yeah, just for a reminder for those of you guys that, probably just watch the skill players and aren't paying attention to the
shame
important bits
on
up
you.
front. So you got Robert Scott, and you got Maurice Smith, and you got Dimitri Emmanuel. Those are really the 3 guys we should be watching. Those are the 3 returners here. So we'll kind of keep our eyes on those.
Yeah, Bless Harris was hurt in the first game against Duquesne.
And we do have some Bless Harris spring game film if we want to look
in
at that
75, later. Dylan Gibbons is gone, and 79, Justin Turntine is gone as well.
Correct.
So what's the first thing you see on this, Adam? I see 52 having some struggle with an inside move there.
Yep, which they had fits, and we talked about like Wake Forest. You brought that up. There was a lot of struggles with wide angle rushers. We talked about the Y9. Looks like he oversets here, and then his back doesn't really help him out at all.
He almost pushes
too
him
far inside. He kind of that gets sloppy. Just not well done by either. I don't know if he doesn't realize that he's getting that help from the back. He's actually in a really good position there.
Yeah,
and then the back kind of knocks him inside.
He seems a little too much outside position when you have outside help. You know what I mean? Like that's a huge lane.
That's what
for the
I'm saying.
rusher.
I wonder if he doesn't realize that back's helping. It's tough to say, but you get it. Mo's helping on the D tackle on the left, then comes off and comes over to help out with Meech.
And you can see kind of one of the major complaints about Mo. I mean, he's a really smart guy. He does a good job here picking up the block, but he's always been on the lighter side. You can see he kind of gets pushed back a little bit here.
Yep. He doesn't have the ass to anchor, and he ends up getting in the lap of the quarterback. But it's a quick throw, so ultimately no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
All right. So
the strength of this offensive line has been running the football, though. I mean, that's what they're good at. That's where they make their bread. We need to see them elevate their game from a pass blocking standpoint.
Yep. So you see
they
a good
get nice
job
push there. Absolutely.
Yeah, working a nice double team inside. Mo and Gibbons. They work on the one tech up to the backer.
Yep. And then Scott does a good job of stalemating the end out here.
Yep. Yeah, you see it's a lot of stalemates. It's not a lot of movement. There's not a lot of getting into guys and driving them, which is that ceiling we talk about.
But here you see Meech on the backside. This is, incredibly talented defensive tackle, Mason Smith here.
Absolutely.
does a good job holding him up here.
Yeah. Well, they do a good job of working the angles there. They're not asking Meach to dig out Mason Smith at the point of attack.
Just hold him up.
Mm-hmm.
No, and Gibbons does. And I think that I like Dylan Gibbons' level of play. There might, depending on who's there, I think we might have an upgrade, I think, in the run blocking game for the guy who's going to play there this year. But no, still good enough against a really talented line.
Gibbons was a warrior. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, and that, I don't want to underplay that.
Constantly dinged up, like constantly battling something with his body, which hats off to him for being so tough and was a great leader for that room. But yeah, I think Roddick presents a little bit of an upgrade as far as athleticism and foot speed when it comes to some of these pulls.
Yeah, and here, yeah, we'll watch Roddick. Roddick's
sure why this
really
cuts back. It looks out the gate on the front side. Oh, yeah. JT pulled it. I'm sorry.
JT pulls it. But good job here by, two guys we're watching, Maurice Smith, Dimitri Emanuel, kind of double teaming Jaquelin Roy, who, NFL drafted by the NFL this past year. So, really good defensive tackle. They do a good job of actually, I mean, they get some, if we go back to all 22, we can kind of see that on this double team up front, they're able to kind of use that leverage that they have from the angles to get him back, 3 yards. But that might not be Roy. That might be someone else.
Either way, nice movement too on the
They block this play as well as anybody does. This is their bread and butter. This is who they want to be.
Yep.
They want this play to be north and south. We talked about it a little bit with Mike. Alex Atkins has talked about it a few different places this offseason. Like this is what they want to hang their hat on here, running counter. So it makes sense that this is what they're going to block the best.
How do you feel about Smith's movement here? So Robert Scott, sorry.
I think he pulls fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's moving well. He got injured in the Louisville game, I believe, after this. So
and after that, it was just all downhill for him. And it seems to be the case every year, unfortunately.
Yeah. The body takes wear and tear.
Mm-hmm. And he's been having to do this. He was plugged in as a freshman. He's never really just been able to kind of have that steady progression of development. He's just constantly been fighting his body in his career. And
he does a good job. He sets here. He gets an inside move. He's able to kind of recatch his feet.
Yep.
Much better when you consider that first play that we watched where he got absolutely nuked on that inside move. That's a good adjustment from him.
A little jet.
Yeah, jet one way, counter the other.
Yep.
Let's see. So now you see Meach pulling across the right guard. Not much to see here.
Not much to see here because the play design is confusing the crap out of him a little bit, man. Like that's another thing that's going to help this offensive line is like I'm watching it just as a bystander. You can see like number 90 for LSU. He doesn't have any idea what to do right now. Like, look at him. He's frozen.
Lost in space.
Yeah, dude. That's great, man. I love watching this offense.
Yeah, again, you just bought 5 yards downfield before you're touched by an LSU defender. So don't have to block their defensive line for that. Good looking play. All right, I think we could get through a couple more and I think we're getting a
good job by Scott on the top there.
And I think one thing. Go ahead, Adam.
No, I was going to say he might be going against Ojulari.
No, 35.
Not sure who that is, but either way, I mean, he was a different player in this game. He was healthy, and you hope he's back to that player because that caliber player is a starter.
Nice job by Meach there.
Yeah, Meach does a really good job here. He sees the action. He's able to kind of displace this guy and get his eyes back on the. He essentially blocks 2 people here.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, direct him to the inside. What I was going to say before is that a lot of the things we're seeing right now, you got to throw the injury crap out of the window. This is as healthy as they were all year. It was right after Duquesne. Right. It's more of like strength issues type of stuff. The technique looks fairly clean. And even if it's not, it looks like they clean it up as the game goes on. So a whole nother like strength and conditioning program with Josh Storms, I think. I'm really excited to see how these returning guys are going to play.
They made a point of emphasis clearly to go out and get bigger and stronger.
Yeah, Scott looks pretty. That's a pretty good block by Scott.
Yeah, especially their upper bodies. I mean,
Roddick's a big boy. You could tell Bless Harris went through a major physical transformation. I mean, he looks humongous on the upper half now. Jeremiah Byers is a big, powerful guy.
Kev, you've seen these returning guys in person. I guess physically, as you pull up the other tape, how do they look compared to last year? You saw this unit last year and this year. How do they compare at the same time?
So this is spring, so we're gonna kind of be able to see some like Bless Harris. This is really where we want to focus. I believe he's playing a lot of right tackle here.
Yeah, so he's on the left right there.
He's on left tackle, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Darius is in there at right tackle.
Yeah, Darius Washington's someone else that we didn't talk about. He's going to be someone that can play anywhere on the offensive line. The guys look big. Especially upper body wise. It seems like that was a big focus, and that makes sense. I think that they had developed their lower bodies. That's one of the reasons they were able to kind of be effective run blockers last year. But in order to be a good pass blocker, you've got to be able to win that hand battle. You've got to be able to kind of win that fight right there. So you can see it right here. Initially, right off the line, Bless gets his hands up in the chest face mask area of Patrick Payton, and that's what stalemates them. That's what wins that game.
Well, it almost looks impressive. I was going to say, it almost looks like Peyton's going to win that rep, and then he just can't quite get around Harris at the very end, right?
Bless does a pretty good job of keeping his hands off of him, not letting him get engaged. But I'm equally as impressed by what Darius Washington's doing down at the bottom part of the screen here, going against Jared Verse. He's nice and square there. He's got a little bit of help, which is fine. Verse is a All-American caliber player, first round NFL draft pick type. So, I'm okay with where they're at there. Those are good winnable reps.
Go ahead, Kev.
I think it's just, some of these guys that have been in the program have shown out well, and it's going to be hard for some of the new guys to step in and try to compete when, there's not much of a door. I think you see Darius Washington here. There's a handful of offensive linemen in the country that can stop a Jared Verse pass or bull rush like this. And, it's not textbook, but he does the job,
God, and especially with a kid like Washington too, whose MO has been upper body injuries. A strong Darius Washington has not given up a spot in the starting lineup easily. Harris does another good job stonewalling a very talented pass rusher in Patrick Payton. This is the type of stuff that bodes well for an offense at Florida State. You'd think with the receivers that they added is going to be passing a little bit more.
A little counter run, timed up ugly here on the blocking scheme wise. Not timed up great. They're not really in good position. Bless is way too tight. He needs to be deeper.
Yeah, that's slop. They gotta work through that during practice.
Yeah, you can see
Daniel Lyons, that's stuff you'll figure out.
Kind of pushing Maurice Smith back, and
that's what Mo is. You're going to work angles with him. I think they would have liked to have seen maybe Casey Roddick push him, but they went into the season basically saying Mo's your starter. That's the only dude that's got a job locked up.
And you can see Harris too. He doesn't look as clean on those pulls as Scott did against LSU. I think that's something with familiarity. I think that'll be good. One thing I did notice on the other clip too, and we noticed it in the LSU game, is Emmanuel is really good keeping his head on a swivel. Yeah. He looks like a very steady hand out there. I think it's going to be very tough to supplant him from one of those starting guard jobs.
Bless is definitely a better pass blocker than Rob Scott, but I think Rob, as of what we know now, has been a better run blocker. So, it'd be interesting to see how that battle kind of works itself out.
Yeah, but
because they need to throw the football. As much as they want to be a run the football team, as much as I would love for them to just run the ball 90 times a game, you've got to throw the football to win championships. So
I think you're feeling pretty good. You've got, we've seen three guys at tackle who I think, are blocking. We've shown them blocking LSU and Florida State, two of the better defensive lines you'll kind of see in college football. And to kind of have that luxury of three guys and then a fourth guy who we can watch here in a second at the tackle position, who are all, at least starter quality guys. That's hard to come by.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harris impressed us all a lot just visually during that spring game. Washington looks great there in those couple reps that we watched. Scott, when healthy, was very effective against LSU. It's just you got to see what condition he's in. So I'm with you, Kevin. Then we start talking about, are we going to watch Roddick's film first? Or are we going to watch Byers first?
Let's finish out the tackles. We're just looking at Bless and Darius Washington. This is Jeremiah Byers.
This is one of the top guys in the entire portal, regardless of position. So I can't wait to watch this kid. I mean, what physical attributes stand out to you guys when you watch? You've seen his film before. What stands out to you, Adam?
He's powerful and he's agile. Like, he's got really good feet. He plays under control. He's balanced at all times. I mean, you just kind of see him here, his movement skills. Look how light his feet are, getting into his drop. He stays balanced. He redirects really nicely, and then he picks that looper that's coming back outside up.
Yeah.
And he's playing right tackle here, right?
Yeah, he's 63. He's at right tackle here. Okay. So all the clips are from this end. Oklahoma's got a really solid defensive line, as we saw against FSU. Yeah. Does his job.
Yep.
He kind of passes off this defensive lineman, keeps his head up. But yeah, you see how light-footed he is. That's really what you're looking for. Someone, I mean, you don't get that size speed combination very often, right? So when people talk about him, you see little things like this. Probably could have done a better job of kind of recognizing this stunt and not losing a step here. But the size movement combination is really what you're looking at.
Yeah, he's athletic. He got beat on that play. That was a nice outside move by their player.
All right, okay, let's see if we can't get
a wide split there.
Extremely.
Yeah, holds up well. There you go.
Yeah, against a really good defensive end out there.
How would you say he's handled himself in practice so far, Kev?
Based off what I've seen, he honestly took a step up from the spring, which is kind of what you were hoping. You know, he in practice at UTEP, he's not getting to see these Florida State level players all day, every day. And so like you see it here, right? Yeah. What the kind of things we kept seeing in the spring where, you know, he kind of isn't anticipating this little move by this Oklahoma defensive tackle. And he kind of just occasionally misses blocks like this, or he oversets or something. I think I've seen him take a big step in the fall, just based off what I saw, where he's making a little bit less of those mental errors and just letting his physical, you know, his frame win him battles. And I think more and more often you're seeing him learn and kind of soak up these principles like a sponge. I think he is a little bit more of a developmental guy than people were giving him credit for, but he's a guy that
it's a nice play right there.
Yeah, has such a high ceiling. I mean, you see how he just smothers this dude.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you too, and that's kind of been the MO with a lot of these transfer portal guys. Spring, it's almost like, I mean, I don't think we talked about Johnny Wilson a lot last spring, right? It takes time, but once it clicks for them in that Norvell offense, it really seems like there's a meteoric rise. And this kid is athletic. I do like the way he moves. I'm with you. Maybe a little bit more awareness instead of just going straight forward. He seems to get beat by a little bit of lateral moves right off the line right now, but he can stonewall him with the best.
Yeah, he looks like it's not an athleticism thing. He looks like there's some technique issues there that I'm sure they're constantly working on.
Yeah, he opens himself up a little bit too much here.
He hops. He jumps out
instead of sliding, usually.
It's almost like because you have that extra athleticism, you want to hop and you don't need to show it off, man. Just short, quick, concise steps. And Atkins is working on that. But I like the building blocks of this kid.
Yeah. The raw tools are there for him to be really good.
Do we think he's a tackle in the FSU offensive line? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where they're going to try to work him. That's where we saw him in the spring game.
Just that kid. Yep, Race is there, number 31. That's a good rep. It's a good long block.
Yeah, that's really tough to do. And he does a good job. So once he gets, going against Verse and, Peyton, once he gets in position and is able to kind of anchor, he's as good as anybody on FSU's offensive line, maybe even the best at that physical component of it. It's just, like you see in this film, it's just those little things, those little mistakes, oversetting a little bit, that can really be a bother.
Well, he's good.
His floor may not be as high just because of some of the technical stuff that he seems to have lapses with, but his ceiling is maybe the highest of the guys we've talked about so far.
And Adam, as an offensive line coach, he's good when he gets his hands on you. I'm not worried about that. It's the over whiffing. What would you do as an offensive line coach? What's Atkins working with on him to get more consistent contact? Because once he gets his hands on you, you're locked up.
It's just everyday stuff. I mean, they're just working recognition. Some of that's just film study, understanding the what you're going to be seeing out of the opposing team. But it's just drill work. I mean, I'm sure they're constantly working on his footwork.
Yep.
And this is a tough.
And then being a cerebral player, like here's a situation they all kind of screw up. But he's laid off the ball. We've seen some mental lapses out of him in the course of this game. They need to, make sure he's constantly being focused. I'm sure they're challenging his mental toughness and awareness, and making sure that he's constantly on point and his head's in the game throughout every rep. And who knows what the score is at this point for this game, but I mean, they're doing the same stuff they're doing with everybody with this kid. Just working technique every day. That's what O-line is. It's about consistency and good technique.
But you know what, Adam, what I do like is if you think about the defensive ends that really gave FSU trouble last year, it was more so the quick, slender, athletic guys, the dudes from Louisville, Wake, et cetera, obviously Oklahoma. And he looks pretty good matching up athletic-wise.
Yeah,
whereas,
there you go.
Yeah, like he moves with him well, man. And that helps that kid take himself out of the play. That is very encouraging. That was a massive weakness. And you could see Oklahoma was doing it to UTEP, lining out way wide. And Byers could handle that. So I really like that foundational part of his game. I mean, Kevin, do you agree? I mean, you did a whole bunch of videos that pissed everybody off about how to beat Florida State. So you gave away all the trade secrets. I mean, locking this up might maybe have a little bit less videos to talk about next year.
Yeah, the TLDR of those videos was essentially sorry, did my millennial come out?
No, it was good. It was a good acronym.
Was that you can beat FSU's offensive line if you have a really good defensive line that can get pressure with three people. And that's really how you beat any offense. And that happened because, the tackles, once Robert Scott was injured and Bless Harris was injured, you were dealing with players that, you weren't hoping were your starting tackles at the beginning of the season. And I think they have a little bit more depth there. And I think Byers does things that no one else on this roster can do. It's just, can you get him there in time against the LSUs and the Clemsons, who are really the two teams that are most likely to take advantage of the weaknesses that other players might have.
And a whiff against Syracuse isn't a death knell. A whiff against an LSU, against a Clemson with the dude with that type of closing speed, hitting maybe Jordan's blind side or something like that. That's where turnovers and stuff start to happen. Let's take a look at Casey Roddick, because this is interesting. We talked a lot about Florida State's woes on fourth down, maybe some situations where it was an obvious man-up situation. This is a big dude. This is a big dude on the interior, and I thought it was a nice pickup.
So he's going to be the left guard, I believe, in these, number 70 here. And what really stands out is he's another guy that's pretty big. He's especially bulked up upper body, like his arms are the size of your, thighs and
maybe yours.
And he's very fleet-footed.
Yeah, another athletic, powerful dude.
He likes to hit, Adam. I like that, dude. He's looking for contact.
Figuring out the trends here. I mean, they wanted to go out and get guys that were going to afford them the opportunity or allow them to win short yardage situations more often. They wanted people movers, and with
people
Byers,
movers who can move across the line of scrimmage. Yeah,
Roddick, Byers, Keandre Jones, who we probably won't take as much of a look at tonight, but they went out and got big, physical people movers, and it was clearly a point of emphasis for them.
Yeah, I like in the first couple clips, you see Roddick pulling across the line of scrimmage. I think that really highlights kind of his skill set, where he's at. He's someone that is going to fit well in a counter scheme where he's
Mhm.
able and asked to be moved, to move a lot and have to pull across the line of scrimmage a lot. And I think he does that well. You see him kind of making two chips and moving upfield here.
He's always, there's constant motion there. He's always looking for somebody to hit. And with this Norvell offense, with all that movement, where one good block at the second level turns a 10-yard run into a 50-yard run, that is going to help out big time.
Yeah. And this was a god-awful Colorado team.
Very bad. Very bad. And the effort is still very good against a very talented Oregon team.
Yeah. I mean, there you get a good glimpse of it there. He's overtaking. This is a good Oregon front. I mean, that's movement.
And
that's not stalemating. That's movement.
It's movement, and he's one-on-one, which
he's still finishing the play.
Like we saw clips of FSU's offensive line last year. There wasn't always movement like that,
especially in one-on-one situations. You saw double teams; they were able to get some push, but one-on-ones, it was mostly stalemating, especially against teams of Oregon's, caliber.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the next step for this offense to find consistencies, winning short yardage situations, winning predictable run situations.
Oh man, I like that block, dude.
Yeah, just kind of throw someone to the ground.
It was that's a good hand fight. He's gonna be fun to watch in his own scheme too, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very, very, very agile, very, able to overtake, like we were just saying. In a zone blocking scheme, you often you need to be able to have those feet that can get around a defender, and I think he's got them. Yeah, I really like what you get out of both Byers and Roddick. I think Roddick's a little bit more able to step in game one, but I mean maybe the ceiling isn't quite where
Makes
Byers
some sense.
is.
What's the X factor for this offensive line, guys? If the one player or one concept or one thing where if they hit could really take Florida State has, I mean, Vegas has them as like a 10-ish win team, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what we're all expecting from our win predictions. What's going to be the X factor from an offensive line standpoint that could push them to 11? CFP type stuff.
I think it's if your tackles become top flight.
Okay.
And I think that if Bless Harris and Jeremiah Byers or Darius Washington or
Rob
Scott, if they take the next step into becoming truly top flight offensive tackles for your league or even nationally, like that's what's going to really elevate them to a higher ceiling.
Follow up. Do you think there's a good chance of that happening?
I mean, I think Bless has got it in him.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's a good enough run blocker. I need to see it from him.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been a strength for him. But they've made a major point of emphasis. You see his upper body now. I mean, it's drastically different from when he got here.
Yeah.
So how does that translate into his athleticism as a pass blocker? Does he keep that athleticism, or is he too top heavy as a football player? Because it looks awkward with him moving around out there. I mean, he looks top heavy, but
yeah, they kind of all do at this point.
Yeah,
I mean,
they really do.
Yeah,
they really do. And then I think Byers has got it in him. Just is he going to get there in these first 4 games? That's the question. And I mean, I think Rob and Darius are they're the consistency guys. Like they're the dudes that you're going to be able to show up with every week and know what you're going to get out of them. And it's not going to be elite, but it's going to be solid. And there's a lot to say for that. I mean, to know that you've got that sitting there if and when you need it to plug in. Or I mean, Mike's already alluded to they're going to rotate guys this year. So to be able to get a Byers off the field and throw a Darius or Rob Scott out there, or vice versa, to get a Rob Scott off the field and plug a Jeremiah Byers in there for some reps in game is interesting. I'm curious to see how that works out, but it will allow you to keep those guys fresh, go over anything that they're seeing from the sideline, go over with them, in drive or between drives. It's curious. I still worry about the ceiling. Like I think the ceiling's coming for this group. The ceiling, in my opinion, is Armella, Lucas Simmons, Jalen Early. Like I think that's when you're talking about the true ceiling of this group taking that next step.
Okay. And I think that's very fair. Kevin, are there guys that we haven't talked about that you think that we should at least just mention as kind of like an honorable mention? I think it just goes to show the depth of this offensive line. We talked about like 8 dudes, and there's still like some guys that you just named, Adam, that we haven't spoken about.
Yeah.
Any names that we're missing that you've seen out at practice? And from a schematic standpoint, what do you think that Florida State is this offensive line is going to be good at? And then after that, I want to talk about where we think this group is going to end up as far as like competency as a unit.
Yeah, I think that in terms of guys that you're really going to see as major contributors on this season, which is really the point of this video, I think we kind of covered it.
Okay.
I think you're going to see Keandre Jones in there. He's a big body. He's a guy that, when you really need push, he's someone that you can rotate in there. I think they're reshaping his body and kind of seeing what else you can get out of him. I think that this offensive line is going to be what you need it to be. I think you need it to be good enough to let your stars shine.
Okay.
And I think they were that last year. I think they're a little bit better this year. I mean, you have a healthy Bless Harris, and you've got Jeremiah Byers added on top of the tackle room, which was really the part that hurt you last season. Like that's really where teams took advantage of your offensive line. So you have more depth there. I think you're good enough. I think you're good enough to let other people shine. My big question comes if Maurice Smith goes down.
Yeah.
Who do you have at center behind him? Who do you trust to take snaps? Who do you trust to do that for you each and every snap for the rest of the season if something were to happen there? I think outside of hoping for the best of the best for the tackles, that's the worst case scenario for the offensive line and potentially the worst case scenario for the team. I think there are a lot of other position groups you could recover from, but that one would be a giant question mark for me.
Yeah, okay. I agree.
So we're talking about this offensive line in August of 2023. We talked about the 2022 line, and we said they were average to like average plus. In August of 2024, how are we describing the play of this year's offensive line as a projection? Adam Brown. The 2023 offensive line was blank.
Good, not great.
Okay, good, but good though. And we've been getting good from the Marianas Trench of despair that it was 3 or 4 years ago. Good is a monumental thing. So I do want to emphasize that. But you think we're going to be talking about it was good?
Yeah, I think good, not great. I think there's going to be times where they have their issues. But I don't think you're going to have a Wake game where, I mean, knock on wood, where you've got 2 backup offensive tackles in there and they just can't cut it at all. Like they lost that Wake game because of the 2 offensive tackles, point blank. So I don't think you're going to find yourself in a situation like that this year, just because of the depth and the number of bodies that you've finally gotten in the program and in that room. So we're going to find out how good, and I think we're going to find it out really quick. You're going to find it out against LSU whether you're good is good enough.
Yeah.
And to be fair on that point, and I agree with you 100%. With against like the LSUs and the Clemsons and stuff like that, there's like maybe 5 or 6 teams in the country whose offensive line units could handle it without having an issue.
Yep.
So we're talking about, like, I don't know. I don't want to put words in y'all's mouth. Kevin, before I guess I'll ask one more question. Do you think it's going to be a good unit?
Like, what do you have? I think one of those things is going to be, it's going to be one of those things that's tricky because, offensive line stats are kind of melded with everybody else. So if everybody else just goes off, if you have a top 5 offense, it's going to look like your offensive line is good. But I think the telling thing is how many of these guys are going to get drafted. Like, how many of these guys is the next level going to be like, yeah, this is a guy that I want. That's the difference between, I think this is an extremely solid offensive line with a good floor that's going to be good enough for the stars to shine, which will make their stats look good. And you'll be tempted to be like, well, this is a top 10 offensive line because they had 26 yards per rush or something stupid,
Oh yeah, that'd be pretty good. They might actually be if that happens.
That might be it.
But like,
I know what you mean. Yeah, it could be I'm with you. It's a sum of the parts type deal. It's funny because the offensive line, when they're bad, it's disastrous and nobody can get off the ground. But with this type of offense, with Jordan Travis, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Trey Benson, they might look a little bit better than they are. We all think they're going to be like a good unit. I guess last question before we go. What kind of range are we looking at if we had to rank this position group? What are we projecting them as? Like a top 20 unit, top 10, top 15, maybe more? Adam, what do you think?
I would probably put them in the top 30 range, top 30, top 35 range. I just don't think the ceiling. I just don't think the ceiling is there for them.
I like them better than top 30. I feel like it'd be like a top 15, top 20 offensive line because they are going to get. I mean, if you're talking talent level, that's different.
Yeah.
But as far as performance, the guys around them are going to help them, and the scheme is going to help them. I guess top 30 in talent level. I think performance-wise, I think it's going to be like a top 15 unit. That's what
I'm excited to have this conversation next year when we're talking about Lucas Simmons. Like Kev's right. Like a lot of this is going to be judged on the NFL prospects. And they're all waiting in the wings. Like those guys are coming. They're coming, next year, and that's really exciting.
I think so Trey, to your point, it really depends on how you want to like if we're just talking about like pure like ceiling talent, how good is this offensive line? Yeah, they're probably a top 30 unit, like AB said. But if you're asking me how many offensive lines would I trade for?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
They might be like a top 15 unit because they're exactly what this team needs.
Because that's analogous. You know what's funny about that before we go? That's analogous to Florida State as a whole. And that's why this is going to be such an interesting year because talent-wise, when you look at the blue chip ratios and all this stuff, because this team is built non-traditionally, it's not as talented as the preseason projections. Like McMurphy had us at like 3. We have seen us at 6, 10. Dude, team talent-wise, we are not that. But as far as how good of a football team that we are, yeah, I definitely feel like we're top 10. So it's funny. The offensive line is kind of a microcosm of the team in itself. So it's going to be very interesting. How about that? Well, then good. I don't want to say anything stupid. Let's end it. All right. For Adam, for Kevin, for Trey, only on Knowles 24/7 are you going to watch 42 minutes of video and then just get it wrapped up in the most perfect little analogy bow that you've ever seen. We love you. Go to Knowles247.com. Subscribe. It's the best site in the entire world. Duh. You know that. X's and Knowles. Subscribe. Film time is here. This is the time to subscribe. We are going to be back fast and furious, and you guys are family. Obviously, the Knowles 24/7 YouTube has a lot of hot fire going down on it, so you better subscribe, put your notifications on for that. And guys, the season is upon us. Keep chopping.